So looking back now, I realised that I'd always been asking the question, why are we here? I loved life and felt incredibly lucky with all the things that I had, but I always had this question and this thought of, if it's all just going to end, there's a hopelessness, a meaninglessness about life. And I looked for the answer of why are we here in many places and never got the answer. Then at a weekend away with friends last year, I had a chat with a friend who became a Christian whilst at university. And this chat was the first time that I really heard about Christianity. And although I had loads more questions and I didn't understand it, something stuck with me. And I realised that I needed to find out more about Jesus. On the way home that weekend in the car, I shared this with Gemma and said I thought we should explore this further.
On the drive home, Andy told me about a chat that he'd had, and it was completely out of the blue. Faith wasn't something that we were exploring. We'd never really talked about it before. We just kind of lived our lives in a position where we didn't really believe in any sort of God. Unlike him, I didn't really have any big questions about why we were here. It wasn't something that I thought about all the time. I guess the nearest thing to that was me thinking about what's our common purpose. What is the thing that holds all humans together? What's the single thread that is common to all of us? I guess the other side of it was I didn't really know what I was saying no to, so I thought I should give that a chance. I didn't know what I wasn't believing in, so I thought that while supporting Andy, I might find a bit more out for myself, and then at least I can come from a more informed position.
So we decided to go to an open evening at church. The evening consisted of a number of topics, followed by a Q&A session. Although there was loads I didn't understand, it was compelling how passionate that the speakers were. We decided to try out a service at church, and it was after a coffee that our friends asked if we'd be up for having dinner each week and then read the Bible. And it completely caught us off guard. We thought, why do you want to have dinner with us each week? Why do you want to cook for us each week? And yet we said yes, because we thought, why not?
Over a number of weeks with our friends, we read Mark's Gospel. It was completely new. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know any of the names of the books of the Bible or even any of the people in it. But I didn't really feel like there was any pressure. Reading with friends meant that it was a really comfortable environment, and I felt that I could ask some challenging questions or things that were on my mind in a really safe environment, and that was really great to explore it with them. On the drive home, Andy would always ask, what did I think of it that night? And as the weeks went by, sometimes I dread those questions because sometimes I just didn't know the answer. I know that what I'd heard that night had really challenged me, made me think differently about the world, and it was completely countercultural. So although sometimes I dreaded those questions, I knew that was because it was a really challenging thing that I was hearing and made me think differently.
For me, over the course of reading the Bible and going to church over a few months, I felt more and more compelled that what I was reading and hearing was true. But I was worried that there would be a point where I would come across something and I'd go, that's the reason I didn't believe. However, I realised more and more the question that I'd always been asking of why are we here was clear.
I realised that as we were reading, as the weeks went by, I was gaining more and more knowledge about who Jesus was. But I didn't quite know how to become a Christian. I didn't realise that it wasn't actually anything I could do. It was only when I got some really bad news and everything was completely turned upside down that in that moment I knew I wasn't alone. When I knew I had nothing left, I was prepared to turn to him wholeheartedly and knew that he was waiting there for me.
Although we have come from very different starting points with very different questions, God has taken us on a journey and opened our eyes to help us see how the story of Jesus makes sense of everything.